So speaking of doing your part and, you know, your part not working
Mm.
and
Yeah, let's
stuff,
hear it.
we did finally get a proper update here from Virgin Orbit, who had a part not work. Uh, for those of you who remember, Virgin Orbit is kind of the sibling company to Virgin Galactic, where they are going orbital, and what they're doing is they're basically dropping a giant missile off of a 747. The 747, of course, has a extra pylon for transporting spare engines across the country. That's a normal part for 747s, I guess. And so they have a 747, and they drop this giant. I mean, it is a massive orbital class rocket off the side of it, and they went for it in what was that, May? Right? Yeah, I think late May. They went for their first orbital flight, and it lit, and everything went fine. The drop test, the drop part of it went fine. It ignited its engine, and then after a few seconds, the engine failed. So they did a full blown, of course, investigation, and these investigations like this require the FAA and some of their customers. In this case, their customers NASA for one of their first flights. And I like this. They go, I just want to read this because this is a really, really good. This is just as perfect, like how you go about an investigation. And I just think this is an excellent statement. In the business of launch vehicles, finding the direct cause of any failure of any flight is incredibly important, but certainly not sufficient. In order to truly get to the root of the issue, it is important to ask why after why after why. If the answer to the first why is because the high pressure LOX line failed, then the second why must be why did it fail? That in turn must be followed by more whys, including why didn't we anticipate this failure? Why wasn't this failure observed in our earlier testing? And more. To all those, you must add in a healthy dose of what else could have happened? What would this failure have looked like if it occurred at a different point in the mission? And hundreds more questions. Creating a robust fault tree or fishbone diagram is important, especially for those visual learners. I just love that because it shows what they actually have to do when they're investigating a failure and look at how many other things could have this affected, what else could have happened. And I just really I liked that paragraph a lot. And so what they've done is you have to read this statement. We'll have it linked in the description, but it's just really well written up. I really like their company culture because they just talk a lot about, how they're doing things. And so they learned a lot of good data because for once they finally had the vehicle under power. So they now know about the dynamic loads. They know more about, how much it vibrates and all of that type of stuff. So they can really pass that knowledge off to their future customers with some proper data, which is good because otherwise you're just kind of guessing. So now they have real data, real flight data, even if just for a second. But most importantly, of course, they're fixing the root cause issue, which was that the oxygen line basically, or the high pressure oxygen line burst and stopped providing oxygen, high pressure. So after the pump, it burst and was no longer feeding the engine high pressure oxygen. So yeah, but what's interesting, that was a demonstration mission, and their next mission was supposed to be their first orbital flight, and the customer was NASA with a handful, 11 or 13 CubeSats for NASA for the NASA Venture Class Services Program. So they basically came to NASA and they're like, hey, so we're gonna fly another demo, and NASA was like, no, we're ready for you guys to fly with us. If you know what the root cause is, go ahead and why don't we fly on your next mission? Like, well, we'd rather demonstrate that we can get to orbit before we launch payloads for customers. It's 11. So what's nuts is that NASA basically talked him into it, saying well, this is kind of part of the venture class launch services, is we want there to still be some risk, and we're investing in that. So even if this second launch is a failure, that's kind of part of this program, is the inherent risk of new launchers, of these smaller launchers, and they're willing to risk the 11 CubeSats.
Wow.
And that's what they're doing, I guess. And so they're hoping to be back at it and flying this mission for NASA by the end of the year, is my understanding.
That's amazing. Now, this is not the tourist version. This is the commercial side?
Correct. This is the orbital, totally different
they split
vehicle.
them out a while ago, right?
Yep. So Virgin Galactic has kind of that weird looking dual fuselage plane with the rocket plane underneath it. They go suborbital, they come back down. It's a 20-minute ride basically, or I guess 20-minute like flight ish. This is a proper orbital rocket, but they still love the air launching. They're launching it off of the wing of a 747.
I feel like we've done a half dozen why don't they justs about that same thing and being like, yeah, it's not a good idea. And then here we are.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely hotly debated. You know, is it worth all the extra effort and all the things, you know?
Because like if I remember the general thought was you'll get to that however high it can take you, your rocket would get there in like 15 seconds anyways. Just from the ground or something like in no time at all, you've already gained all that back.
Right. And you're if your rocket's at that altitude, it's already traveling like way faster than the jet. You know, it's already probably gone supersonic. Yeah. Like it's got a lot of inertia behind it. And the general consensus is really always been it's just easier to have a regular launch pad where you can service the rocket, do all the things. Because the pros of having it up, you know, an air launch is that you can use a more vacuum optimized nozzle, and you gain a little bit of, you know, you gain a little bit of altitude, you gain a little bit of velocity in your general direction, but it's not substantial. It's maybe a couple percent, maybe a 5 or 10% gain when you factor in everything or something. But you also have a lot of extra complications.
One thing that I thought was interesting you said there about the asking why and all of that. It reminds me of my corporate days. We I think Robert or no, who was it? Guy Kawasaki. Kawasaki. He's an Apple guy from I don't know the 80s, and he is kind of like this business thought leader guy now. And he had a thing where he talked about they called it a pre-mortem instead of a post-mortem. And they asked all those questions before they did anything, like what can go wrong, how's it going to go wrong, how can we plan for that thing to go wrong,
right?
And hopefully not prevent those things necessarily, but be prepared when something goes wrong. You've already laid it all out, like what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense, I think, especially in a case like this where a launch is like a literal thing, not just like, hey, we're announcing Instagram Reels today. What could go wrong or something? You know what I mean? That kind of a thing. So yeah.
And just to iterate back though to the air launching capability, of course, Andrew in our Discord does say the plane can take you to a bunch of different starting locations. That's one of the cool things is the airplane can get you above weather, can get you onto different inclinations. So you can fly down to the equator if you're wanting to do a fully equatorial launch. You can fly to all these. You can fly to the country of origin. Say they have a top secret payload that they really don't want, like, you know, having to be transported all around. You can fly to them. They can integrate the payload themselves or with their team or whatever. And be more secretive about that, right? Or whatever. There's a lot of, you can basically bring the launch site to them and then launch from anywhere. So it's I mean, there's pros and cons. And after hearing Will Pomerantz, there we go. Will Pomerantz from Virgin Orbit. He's I think the head of like their something business or something. But hearing him talk about it, they've thought it all through, and it's a really cool trade-off. It's a classic, like, interesting to see that one company can get to this point and that conclusion that it is worth it all when others don't. So it's fun to see, like, what was their trade-off. And one of the biggest things that kind of closed, I think, and made it worth it was actually using a 747. And not just for the fact that, you know, obviously it's Virgin, so they could buy one from, or, you know, what's his name?
They already have him.
He basically just, I think they got one for cheap, you know. Because of Richard Branson. But not only that, the cool thing about a 747 is service-wise and things like that, you know, there's hundreds of mechanics that have worked, there are thousands of mechanics that have worked on 747s. There's thousands of pilots that know how to fly a 747. There's thousands of 747s with spare parts that they can use.
Yeah,
as opposed to when they build a specialized aircraft, you have a very small team, a very small parts bin, you know, like now we have a 747, which like is one of the most flown and serviceable vehicles. So it's a cool thing. And yeah.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this clip from our show. If that's just not enough for you and you want to watch the full episode, you can go to olfpod.com/YT.
And if you want more from us, you can consider becoming a Patreon member. You'll get early access to episodes. You can join our awesome community. You can actually watch us record live and get your name in the credits by going to olfpod.com/Patreon.
So thanks everyone for watching. Check back every Friday for new clips here and new episodes on the main channel.
Thanks everybody.